These are the most brutal motorcycle deaths to avoid on your next trip. The Russian Dismemberment. A group of cyclists were driving in Russia on a highway in Ulyanovsk. They decided to stage a little race on the highway. The man who staged the race was a priest of a church in town and brought along his brother to join. Even though it was illegal, they thought it would be fun to see who could drive the fastest. They began driving. Everyone was having a blast, a way to take away the stress from the week. The brother in the front was beating everyone, driving over 150 kilometers per hour. Then for some reason he began straying away from the lane, and he began moving towards the oncoming traffic. In a blink of an eye, the brother smashes into a Renault Logan car and blows into pieces. His legs were ripped off on impact and flew across the right lane on the highway. The impact also unfortunately killed the man driving in the opposite lane. His brother watched in horror as he drove past his brother, and in a flash, he rammed into a car ahead and fell onto another upcoming car. Paramedics arrived at the scene and found that 3 people passed away. Turns out the priest was going too fast to turn away from the car, meaning he wasn't experienced enough to lean on his bike or experience target fixation, where a rider looks at a hazard too intently, he begins moving in that direction. Either way, no legal action was charged to anyone as the prosecutors were all dead. Deadpool 2. A woman was accepted for stunt driving for Deadpool 2 in British Columbia, Canada. She was excited. She was going to be a part of a high-profile film. Before getting on set, she was a seasoned motorcyclist, but this was her first stunt. It was also in close quarters, which was something she had never done before, but how hard could it be? If anything, it would be easier, and she was right. She successfully achieved the stunt 4 times, and they were good takes, but just to be sure, the directors wanted to do a 5th take. She went down the set of stairs again, however this time she lost control at the bottom of the stairs. She kept moving forward and down a second set of stairs where she kept full throttle on her handlebar. She arrived at the bottom, crossed the street, and avoided pedestrians on the scene, where she then hit a curb that sent her straight into a building through a window. She hits the window straight on with her head, causing it to shatter. Real glass is a lot stronger than movies make them to be. To be able to even break it, you must be moving at a violent amount of speed to shatter it. First responders arrived at the scene, but unfortunately, she was pronounced dead due to blunt head trauma. The company directing was fined $300,000 due to safety negligence, as she was not wearing a helmet and a lack of safety precautions such as barriers to prevent further driving offset. The man split in half. This man was driving a motorcycle on a highway in Argentina in 2024. He was looking for some spare parts for his best friend. He had recently moved into a new place with his girlfriend in a neighborhood nearby. People called him the holiest man in the neighborhood because he was a very respectful and kind man, someone who never disrespected anyone. The 28-year-old man named Pablo Ariel Santillan would unfortunately suffer a horrific crash. He was driving on the highway in the left lane, passing cars as the faster lane usually does, when suddenly a driver from the right lane hits the back of his motorcycle. This pushed him to the railing in between the roads on the highway. He hit the railing with his motorbike, and it launched him over to the highway going the opposite way, where he was hit by a Toyota Corolla that ran over him and split him in half. His intestines were on the pavement, and he died within 5 minutes from the traumatic and severe blood loss. The man that hit him was Carlos Andre Dip, and was under the influence of alcohol while driving. After the incident, he claimed that it was a flu medicine that made him drowsy, and it caused him to swerve into Pablo. The court didn't take his bullshit, and he was charged with manslaughter for reckless and negligent driving, where his license was also suspended. This case scares me from commuting with a motorcycle ever. Just one mistake, and not even yours, can cost your life. The Cage of Fire. A college girl was making a left turn on LSU campus in Louisiana, USA at around 9 p.m., going back to hang out with her friends or finish homework. She arrived at the light. She was hesitant. She thought whether she should turn or not. She looked around and saw there were no cars incoming. No problem then. She began to turn and crossed the street, when she was suddenly struck by a motorcycle, exploding them both into flames. The biker was traveling above 100 miles per hour, causing the car to nearly topple over after the impact. The flames engulfed the car and the bike by the sheer force, ripping apart the fuel tank of the motorbike. If they had not died from the traumatic impact, they certainly would have burnt to a crisp. The girl had not seen the motorcyclist, or perhaps she did, and the cyclist saw her hesitation and decided to speed up so he could pass faster. No one really knew, but either way, both were at fault. Turns out the girl had crossed a red turn light. The biker had been going at least double the speed limit on the campus, and unfortunately, both of those mistakes led to the fatal crash. The pole spin incident. A biker was driving on a street in Sri Lanka, an island located below India. It was around 7 p.m. and he seemed to be in a rush. He was avoiding speed humps with his motorbike by going on the outside lane near the curb. He stayed driving towards the left side of the road, maintaining a close distance to the curb. He successfully leaned and turned a curve to avoid a speed hump in the middle of the road. However, his readjustment to straighten himself led him to drive into the curb, and he wasn't able to turn back towards the road. This caused him to drive towards a pole outside the road. The speed he approached the pole caused him to violently spin around the pole like a rubber band that's been wrapped around a pencil. This caused him to break and deform his spine and tear open his pelvic area. People arrived to see a horrific scene, a man on the ground with a bent spine and blood wiped around the pole. He unfortunately died at the scene due to the traumatic injuries. Had he not been speeding and got on the speed humps as supposed to, he would have lived. The Electrocution Incident. On May 30th, 2025, a thunderstorm appeared in the Tra U district in Vietnam. There was a lightning strike that toppled over a tree that caused a power line to drop onto a road. This wouldn't be a problem as long as no one would cross its path. However, unfortunately, two young men were driving on their motorcycle nearby the area. The rain was moderate and both of the drivers had their helmets on. They drove by a fallen tree and paid no attention to it as it was likely toppled over by a strike they heard earlier. After a couple seconds passing the tree, the driver is suddenly restrained by a cable on his neck and body. It brought them to a halt in the air and the motorcycle skidded in front of them below their feet. A bright spark is seen as they fall to the ground, where they find themselves tangled by a high voltage power line. They struggled, but there was no escape as they were completely wrapped by the cable and could barely move from the voltage as it was. They were electrocuted to death and likely died within minutes from cardiac arrest. The authorities visited the victims' families and fixed the power line to prevent any further tragedies. The Flattened Incident. Imagine you're in Brazil. You decide to grab some groceries nearby in your local town. Luckily, you live nearby and decide to go for a walk. Well, now you're waiting to see if you can cross the street. The grocery store is on the other side. You wait like always, looking both ways to see if you can cross. Your neck is a little itchy, so you start scratching. Seems like the road is clearing up until you see a motorcycle speeding across. You see the biker and his passenger. They shockingly slam into a bus. The bike breaks apart, and the passenger flings away from the bus. Then you see the driver. He gets pinned underneath the bus, where it runs him over on its front set of wheels. You keep looking to see if he'll make it, until you see the rear end wheels of the bus run over the biker's head. You looked away in shock, as you just saw his head burst into brain paste all over the pavement. Other people approach the scene as you notice the look in horror of a brutal death. It's important to say that these accidents are rare, but just from statistics, I would be as careful as possible if you are driving a motorcycle. Anyways, stay safe and peace out.